I didn't scream when I saw her sitting in the unheated garage on an overturned milk crate, wrapped in a moving blanket, while my son-in-law's dinner party glittered through the kitchen windows above her. I didn't throw anything. I just stood in the slush at the bottom of the driveway and watched my wife of 43 years shiver next to the recycling bins, and something in me went very, very quiet. Before I tell you the rest, if you believe family is supposed to protect each other and not use each other, hit that like button and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. My name is Harold Whitfield. No, wait, I should call myself something else here. Let me start again, the right way. My name is Edward Caro. To the people in my neighborhood in Oakville, Ontario, I am just a retired furnace repairman, the old guy in the Tim Hortons parking lot every morning at 7 with the newspaper and the same coffee order he's had for 30 years. Large, double-double. They see my work boots, my flannel jackets, my Ford pickup with the dent in the tailgate I never bothered fixing. They assume I scraped by on CPP and a small union pension. They have no idea that 22 years ago I sold the small HVAC company I built out of my garage to a national chain for a number with 8 digits in it, and then quietly turned around and bought controlling shares in 3 more companies under a numbered holding corporation nobody in my family has ever heard of. My accountant calls me sir. My lawyer calls me sir. My own daughter calls me kind of a hoarder because I still wear the same parka I've had since the Mulroney years. I built it all in the shadows on purpose. I wanted to know before I died who in this world loved me for me and who was only ever doing the math. My wife Patricia, no, my wife Marion Caro. We met at a curling bonspiel in Hamilton when I was 24, and she beat my team by a single rock and laughed in my face about it, and I married her 11 months later. We've been together 43 years now. She is the only living person who knows the full truth of what we have. She doesn't want a bigger house. She doesn't want a winter place in Naples like half our neighbors do. She wants her garden, her book club, and her grandkids close. When our daughter Caroline married Trent, a man with very white teeth and a very specific way of mentioning his job title in the first 5 minutes of any conversation, Marion and I decided to help the way we always have. I bought them their house in Oakville through a numbered company, so it would never trace back to me. I covered the renovations on the kitchen Caroline wanted, the one with the waterfall island that cost more than my first house. I made a few calls, quiet ones, the kind that don't show up anywhere. And Trent ended up with a director title at a mid-size investment firm in Toronto, a job he is absolutely convinced he earned purely on merit. All Marion and I ever asked in return was a guest room when we visited, and that they look after Marion properly when I had to travel, and I do still travel. I had spent the better part of 2 months in Calgary that fall, untangling a logistics merger that had gone sideways, the kind of thing that needs a person in the room, not a person on a call. Marion had a knee replacement 6 weeks before I left. She needed rest. She needed someone checking on her stairs, her ice packs, her physio exercises. I trusted my daughter with that. I trusted that even a man like Trent, for all his polish, would have the basic decency to treat his wife's mother like a human being, while her own husband was 3 time zones away keeping the lights on for everyone, including him. I was wrong about that, and it nearly broke something in me that 40 years on the road, and in boardrooms never managed to break. It was a Thursday night in late November when my flight landed in Toronto, 2 weeks earlier than planned. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to walk in and see that look on Marion's face, the one she still gets like she's 24 again, and I've shown up to carry her curling rocks. I took a cab from the airport instead of having someone pick me up, because surprises don't work if you ruin them with logistics. It was that bitter end of November cold we get here, the kind that gets into your knuckles with the sleet coming down sideways. The cab wound through the snow-dusted streets of Oakville, past the big houses with their landscape lighting, and I felt something tighten in my stomach the closer we got. I've trusted that feeling my whole life. It's the same feeling that told me 22 years ago not to sign with the first buyer who came knocking. It rarely lies to me. The cab pulled up to the house, my house technically, though no piece of paper anywhere says that, and the driveway was lined with cars I didn't recognize. A Range Rover, a couple of German sedans. I frowned. Caroline hadn't mentioned a dinner party. I paid the driver, grabbed my duffel bag, and stood there a moment in the sleet looking up at the place. Every window on the main floor was lit gold. I could hear music, something low and tasteful, the kind of jazz playlist you put on specifically so guests will comment on your taste in jazz playlists. I walked up the driveway with my collar turned up against the wind, an old man with a limp from a bad hip and a duffel bag, looking, I'm sure, exactly like what people assume I am. I went around toward the side door near the garage out of old habit. 40 years of coming in through the mudroom so I don't track salt across somebody's nice floors, and that's when I heard it. A small sound, not a voice exactly, more like a shiver given a noise. The garage door was down, but the side entrance was cracked open maybe 4 inches, just enough for a thin blade of cold light to spill out onto the snow. I pushed it open. She was sitting on an overturned milk crate next to the recycling bins, wrapped in one of the old moving blankets we'd used 15 years ago, when we helped them move into their first apartment. Her hands were tucked under her arms. Her lips had that bluish tinge I'd only ever seen once before, the winter she got caught out on the lake ice fishing too long. Her hair, normally set every Thursday at the salon on Lakeshore, was flat and damp against her head. "Marion," I said, and my voice came out as barely anything at all. She looked up at me with an expression I will carry to my grave. Not relief, not even surprise at first. Confusion, like she couldn't quite place whether I was real or one more thing the cold was doing to her mind. "Edward," she whispered. "You're early. What are you doing out here? Why aren't you inside?" She tried to smile, and that was almost worse than if she'd cried. "Trent said the dust from the renovation upstairs isn't good for my lungs. He said the garage was warmer than people think." She glanced toward the door that led into the house, toward the warmth and the laughter and the smell of someone's expensive dinner. "There's a dinner with people from his work. He said I'd embarrass him with the walker. I have repaired furnaces in basements colder than that garage. I know what cold does to old joints, old hearts, old lungs. I knew exactly how long a 70-year-old woman with a knee replacement could sit on a concrete floor in November before something inside her simply stopped working. And I understood, standing there, that my son-in-law had done the math on that risk and decided it was acceptable. I did not go through the side door into the kitchen. I went back out the way I'd come, around to the front, and I rang the doorbell like a stranger. Trent opened it himself, a crystal glass of something amber in one hand, wearing a sweater that cost more than my first car payment. Behind him I could see a dozen people I'd never met, holding little plates of food, admiring the waterfall island I paid for. He looked at me, at the duffel bag, the wet flannel jacket, the boots, and for half a second something flickered across his face that I can only describe as calculation. Then it resolved into a kind of practiced, condescending warmth. "Mr. Carroll, we weren't expecting you." He didn't step back to let me in. "Caroline didn't mention you'd be. Is everything okay? Where's my wife, Trent?" "Marion's resting," he said smoothly, glancing over his shoulder at his guests. "She gets tired easily these days, you know how it is. We've got people from the firm over. It's a bit of a..." He lowered his voice like he was sharing a confidence. "Delicate evening, actually. There are some partners here I've been trying to land for months. She's in your garage, Trent, sitting on a milk crate. In November." For just a moment his smile didn't move, but his eyes went flat and hard, doing some quick arithmetic about how much I'd seen and how much it would cost him. Then he laughed, an easy, dismissive laugh meant to be overheard by the man standing just behind him in a navy blazer. "She likes it out there, honestly. She's a bit eccentric these days. Says the cold helps her knee." He said it lightly, like he was sharing an endearing quirk, like he hadn't engineered the whole evening so that his wife's mother would be invisible to the people he wanted to impress. Behind him, a voice, my own daughter's voice, called out, bright with hostess energy, "Trent, who is it?" And then Caroline appeared in the doorway in a dress I didn't recognize, saw me, and her face did something I will also never forget. It wasn't joy. It was the look of someone doing rapid mental math about damage control. "Dad," she said, "you're early. Your mother is in the garage," I said, "on a milk crate. Freezing." "She didn't want to be a bother," Caroline said quickly, too quickly, the words clearly rehearsed for exactly this scenario. "Trent has people from the office over. It's important for his promotion, and Mom said herself she didn't mind. She is 70 years old, Caroline. She had knee surgery 6 weeks ago. Dad, please, can we not do this on the front step in front of everyone? I want to tell you," I shouted. People watching this kind of story always expect the shouting, the dramatic confrontation, the old man finally losing his temper after a lifetime of swallowing it. I didn't shout. I have learned over 40-some years of negotiating contracts with men who would happily eat me alive given an opening, that the quiet voice is the one that actually frightens people. I leaned in just slightly so only Trent and Caroline could hear me over the jazz. "Get her a coat. Get her inside, somewhere warm, right now. We'll discuss the rest later." Caroline went pale and disappeared back into the house. Trent stood there another second, recalibrating, and then said with the particular oiliness of a man who has decided his evening is more important than his decency, "Mr. Caro, with respect, this really isn't the time. Maybe we can sit down tomorrow and talk this through like adults." I didn't answer him. I walked past him into the house I had bought, through the foyer I had renovated, past investors I would never have to pretend to be impressed by again, and I went to find a coat for my wife myself. What Trent didn't know, what neither of them knew, what I had spent 2 decades making absolutely certain they would never have reason to find out, was that the house belonged to a holding company called Larchmont Equity Partners. Larchmont Equity Partners belonged, through 2 more layers nobody had ever bothered to peel back to me. The director title at the investment firm that Trent wore like a medal he'd earned in combat had been arranged through a quiet phone call from an old friend on the firm's board, a friend who owed me a favor from a deal in 2003 that I'd helped him out of. The renovation, the cars in the driveway, the waterfall island, the white teeth, the navy blazer investors he was so eager to impress, every single piece of it existed because of money that had passed, invisibly, through my hands. That night, after I'd wrapped Marion in 3 blankets in the back of a cab to my brother's place across town, I wasn't bringing her back into that house, not for 1 more hour. I sat in the cab beside her, her cold hand in mine slowly warming, and I made some calls of my own. The first call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Yvonne, who has handled my affairs for 19 years and has never once asked an unnecessary question. I told her to begin the paperwork on the property. 90 days notice, the legal minimum, delivered the moment the holding company's lease agreement technically expired, which by careful design from the very beginning, it was about to. The second call was to the friend on the investment firm's board. I didn't ask him to fire Trent. I am not a cruel man, whatever Caroline might say about me now. I asked him to simply quietly let it be known among the partners that the director who'd been so confidently courting them all evening had gotten his position through a favor, not through merit, and that perhaps it was time his performance got the same scrutiny everyone else's did. I knew exactly what would happen next, because I'd watched rooms like that my whole career. Men who can smell weakness will absolutely smell it on one of their own the second the protection is gone. The third call, the hardest one, was to Caroline. She didn't pick up that night. She didn't pick up for 4 days. Marion recovered in my brother's spare room with a space heater, a stack of library mysteries, and absolutely no apology forthcoming from anyone in that house in Oakville. I sat with her every evening, made her tea the way she likes it, terrible and milky, and we didn't talk much about Trent or Caroline at all. We talked about the garden she wanted to plant in the spring. We talked about our first apartment, the one with the radiator that only worked if you hit it just right, and how she used to joke that at least it was warmer than where she'd grown up. Caroline called me on the 5th day. By then she already knew about the lease. By then Trent had already had what I understand was a deeply uncomfortable closed-door conversation with 2 senior partners about the nature of his hiring. She was crying on the phone, and some of it I think was real. "Dad, you can't just, that's our house. Trent's job. How could you do this to us?" I said, "How could I do this to you?" very slowly, like I was making sure I'd heard her correctly. And then I asked her the only question I actually wanted an answer to. "Caroline, why did you let your mother sit in a garage in November?" There was a long silence on the line. "Trent said it would just be for an hour," she finally said. "He said the partners wouldn't understand, with her walker and the wheezing, and Dad, his whole career was riding on tonight, I didn't think." "You didn't think," I repeated. "Your mother nearly went hypothermic on a milk crate so a man could impress people in navy blazers. And your explanation is that you didn't think." She didn't have an answer for that. There isn't one. I gave them the 90 days. I am, despite everything, not interested in putting my own grandchildren out on the street with no warning whatever their father deserves. But I let the house go back to being just a house with a mortgage in their own names, the renovation loan called due in full, the director title quietly evaporating back into the ordinary job search of a man with an ordinary resume once you stripped away every favor I'd ever pulled for him. Trent, I'm told, lasted 4 more months at a smaller firm before the partners there discovered, on their own, without any phone calls from me, exactly the kind of employee he actually was when nobody important was watching. Caroline and I are speaking again now, carefully, the way you speak to someone after a serious injury, checking in often, moving slowly, watching for signs of relapse. She has, to her credit, said the word sorry to her mother more than once, and meant it more than once, which is more than Trent has managed even now. I don't know yet if we'll ever be what we were. Some bridges you can rebuild. Some you can only build a different one nearby and learn to use that instead. Marion is sitting across from me right now, in the sunroom we added onto the back of our own modest house here in Oakville. The one with my name actually on the deed. The one I never had any interest in trading up from, knitting something soft and blue for our newest grandchild. The space heater from my brother's place sits folded up in the hall closet because we will never need to borrow it again. She hums while she works, an old song from a dance we went to back when I was still hauling furnace parts in a borrowed truck, and she was the prettiest girl at the Bonspiel. I think about Trent sometimes and Caroline, not with the rage I felt that night in the sleet, but with something closer to a tired kind of clarity. They made the mistake so many people make when they're handed comfort they didn't have to earn. They assumed comfort was their due, rather than a gift someone else was choosing, every single day, to keep giving them. They confused my quiet manner for a lack of options. They confused an old man in a worn parka for a man with no leverage. They never once stopped to ask why a furnace repairman could afford to be so generous in the first place, because the question never benefited them to ask. I learned a long time ago, fixing furnaces in other people's basements, that the people who treat you with contempt when they think you have nothing are showing you exactly who they'll be the moment you actually have something they want. The work boots and the Tim Hortons order were never a disguise I wore to deceive anyone. They were simply who I am. It was Trent and Caroline who decided on their own that a man who looked like me couldn't possibly be worth respecting on his merits alone. True power was never about the size of the house or the year of the car in the driveway. It was about being able to walk back out into that sleet and know, without raising my voice once, that I could put everything right by morning. It was about a woman willing to sit on a milk crate in the cold rather than embarrass the man her daughter married, and a man who came home in time to make sure she never had to do that again. Marion looks up from her knitting now and catches me watching her. She smiles the same way she did the day she beat my curling team by a single rock, like she already knows exactly what I'm thinking and finds it a little bit funny. "You're doing that thing again," she says, "telling our whole story in your head." "Somebody has to remember it right," I tell her. Outside, the first snow of the season is just starting to come down, soft and quiet over Oakville, settling on a driveway that belongs to nobody but us.